Move.
All right, guys. Look who I got. I got Tony Cardin and Bill Frye together here at Bill's shop. Bill, I interviewed Tony. We heard some good stories at lunch and before we got here. You got any stories or questions you got for Tony?
Wow, I don't know. First time I remember seeing Tony was at Flippin', Arkansas. They come up there, and it's just a weekly show, I think. And Garrison and them had just bought that S&S hauler. And I think it was the first S&S hauler ever made. And it still had old red truck wheels on it.
I remember that.
I walked over and took a look inside it, and it was just plywood inside, and they'd all rode down there on the lawn chairs. And I think they rode it like that for a summer.
Yeah.
And that's when I first seen Tony. I think pretty sure he won that night. I think he won that night, and then won about everything we went to that time. If you went to Arkansas or Louisiana, even Southwest Missouri at that time, Tony was either a threat to win or was going to win it. I mean, that's just pretty much the way it was. And I think that's the first time I'd ever met him. And then we started racing some of that super stuff down in Louisiana and Arkansas, and he'd come up and run some of them MLRA races. And I didn't know Tony that well, but I had a GRT, so I kind of hung around all of them a little bit and seeing what I could learn. And it was a good time in life, that was for sure.
We got pit crew of the year that year, didn't we?
I think you did. I think you had my best appearing crew. That's what it was, best appearing crew.
Yeah. I'd always have to get Snoot or Scott. I'd be looking for him, you know, like, we need to be doing this over by the car. And I'd go over to Robbie Stearns' car, 77. He'd be over there talking to his wife, you know.
Yep.
That's always where I had to go if I wanted to find him.
I can see that. I can see that. Yeah.
Tony was telling me, I asked him, the fastest track he thought he'd ever been to was probably Pennsboro.
I couldn't really say.
Well, that big West Virginia track or Pennsboro?
Maybe I just had it second gear. I don't know.
Whichever one that dirt track world championship was at.
That one at West Virginia Motor Speedway was the biggest.
That's that Motor Speedway.
Yeah, up there right by Pennsboro. You'd race Pennsboro one day and then you go to West Virginia Motor Speedway that night.
I remember I wrecked.
Track you been on?
I wrecked for 15 minutes. That's all I know.
Yeah.
Did you see that? That wreck he was talking about?
No, I don't remember. I don't think I was there. I didn't go to them 91 or 2, and you'd probably went the year before.
Okay.
No, I went, fastest one I was ever at, I still think, other than the miles. I mean, them miles are pretty bad, but no, that Bristol's the fastest I was ever on.
You ran at Bristol?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, we ran there twice, and I think but now at West Virginia Motor Speedway, I went out there the first time, and I hot lapped, and I come in, and I felt pretty good. Or maybe timed in, I can't remember. Carol looked at me like I was some kind of stepchild.
I didn't second. No.
And I said, what? She said, you're a second off. I said, no, ain't no way. She said, yeah, you're a second off. And I was. I looked at the times, and I thought I made some good laps. It was just wide open, hang on, throw it in the corners, and let it eat. Now, you didn't ever let off the gas. And you was going fast.
I remember
Go ahead.
that old gal in the infield there standing up on the four-wheelers, you know. And they'd be standing up in there, you know, a bunch of them. And we'd be running around on a caution there, but running 85 or 90 probably. Look like she'd be doing this with her top, you know. I thought, hell, come around the next time we'd be under the green flag. I didn't even look over that way. I was hanging on. I know we was going pretty fast.
There used to be one at Bolivar, Missouri, do the same thing on the backstretch. Maybe in the same one.
So the Bristol track, so fast because it's so banked. Is that the most banked track you ever raced on?
Well, it was big for one. You know, they call a lot of tracks half miles, but they're usually a half mile around the outside. I mean, like Muskogee's a big old half mile, and it was that big or bigger, but it was banked and had traction in it. And I think the fact that it was new dirt is kind of like the dirt up there at the Dome, I think. I ain't never been there. It's hard to get that dirt to lay down, and Bristol was that way. It just didn't lay down that good, and it was a lot of traction. And when there's rough, it's usually traction in the rough, so you really got to run through the rough, and then everything gets tore up. But.
I got you.
Send them down up there at Batesville down when they first started going up there. It's rough son of a gun. By God, you can have 2 motors in there and not have enough.
Yeah. I think I run. Well, I seen you there about the same time.
They went,
I
wow.
I come down there for some kind of race, maybe in a super race, and I run 8 laps wide open, never let off the gas, and the boy in front of me just drove off from me. Had a bigger motor. I had an old 380 or something. He had a 430 Schaefer or something, and a shaver, 430 shaver, and I was running second or third in the feature and broke a fuel pump belt. Mud clod got in the fuel pump belt, and I pulled in. There was mud 4 inches thick on a wedge nose. I bet it had 200-300 pound of mud on the nose from following cars. It's still how hooked up it was in the feature. And I think Tony was leading the feature with about 2 to go and broke his fuel pump belt the same way. Chunk of mud broke it.
Bird said they're going to have to come get him out of the car. He couldn't get out.
I've never seen Batesville like that.
It was a fish pond. That was a fish pond for 20 years or so. And Shaw said it was fish crap is all there was. He said we're racing on fish crap. So
It was hooked up stuff.
it was. I ain't never been on that. I'm still probably as hooked up as I remember a racetrack.
Huh.
I always wanted to get me an oxygen bottle and put it up underneath the car somewhere or another and have me a big valve on it where I could just crack that valve open and just for a second or two there blast off down through there and shut it off. I figured I'd blow all the seatbelt off whoever was behind me.
Yeah. I had a Bill Porter back in Missouri was a drag racer, and he always wanted to build a go-kart. He worked at a oxygen settling company or a trucking company somewhere and said he watched a bottle fall off the dock and break the neck off from it.
Tore out, huh?
He wanted to build a go-kart with a bottle on each side of the driver
Yeah.
and a deal on the back to knock the tops off from them and take it to the drag strip. And he said, "You're going to drive it, Frye." He said, "Ain't nobody else going to drive it." He said, "You're going to have to drive it."
Maybe a slot car.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, tell me the Gundaker story again on camera. So what heck has I've been told to ask you this, so
We was at one of them fall nationals or whatever races at Peevely, and I was driving for Petroff. He called me and said that he had a GRT that he'd built for Moyer, and said Moyer didn't really want to race it. So he said, "You're getting ready to go to the mile." Joe said, "You're going to the mile Sunday and going to run Peevely Friday and Saturday." He said, "You don't want to run this little bull ring 2 nights and then have to take the same car to the mile." He said, "Why don't you race my car at Peevely and then you can race yours at the mile?" He said, "I don't want my stuff on the mile." I said, "Okay, I'll do that." Anyway, and it was kind of different. We get there, and he had that Mark Martin's old hauler, a Winston Cup trailer with chrome and polished and drawers full of parts and lift gate, beautiful trailer. And I walked in there and I was talking to him. I'd hardly ever met him before. I said, "Mr. Petroff," I said, I hate to say this, but I said, "I ain't never drove a car for nobody else." I said, "I really don't know how to act here." And he just kind of looked around and he goes, "This is all my crap, treat it like it's your own." And I hot lapped the car and we torched the bird cage off. We torched the shock mount off the right rear when we got done. I come in, I said, "This has got a 7-inch bird cage shock mount and 5-inch bird cages on it, and it's bottom and right rear shock off out." And he said, "You sure?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, I built this. I know I built that for him. He said, "Well," he said, "what are we going to do?" And I said, "We're going to torch that shock mount off there and weld it back up there where it's supposed to be." He said, "You're going to torch on a car that's been hot lapped 1 time." I said, "It's either that or we ain't going to be no good because we can't get a shorter shock." And he said, "Okay." He said, "Tony, get the torch out of the truck." The guy worked for him named Tony, and I torched her off, welded her on there. I think we run 4th that night. Then the next night it was, I think, a 5,000 to win. Maybe been 10, I don't remember. I think it was 4 the first night and maybe 10 the second. And Gundaker was leading Kevin, and he was running the cushion up high in a Rayburn and Petroff's other GRT car. And I was running around the bottom, and I'd caught him, and I'd meet him at the straightaway, and it was like I needed to use the whole straightaway, and I was gaining about 5 foot a lap on him, and finally I get in there, and I'm about ready to pass him, and I go on the bottom, and I look up, and I see he's jumped a cushion in turn 4 up there where he hadn't ought to be, and I thought, well, I got him here, so I just slid up in front of him at the wall. Well, here he come. He'd collected it off a cushion, and he hit me in the right rear tire with his left front from behind, and it tore the left front spindle off his car. So I come back around, there he is sitting in the middle of the racetrack, out of the car with the steering wheel in his hand. And then if you stopped in UMP, you got put to the rear. So I kind of eased up through there, and he wouldn't move, so I just kind of swerved the wheel to miss him, and about the time the nose was going to take his feet out from under him, he jumped, and he grabbed my car by the windshield post or the roll bar one and tried to hit me with the steering wheel, swung it in the car, and I was gaining speed by that time.
You might need to put your seatbelt on, dude.
About the time I splined the bird up, I think the left rear wheel run over his foot. And I looked out, and all I could see was Kevin cartwheeling beside the car. And I come back around, I threw the steering wheel back out there to his pit crew, and they was hauling his. I never seen him anymore that night.
I was telling them that haul. Go ahead.
Half the crowd, when I come back around, half the crowd was yelling and cheering, and the other half was flipping me off and throwing beer cans.
Hall Racing Engine, who's that guy?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Up there with flames, them was hot up, and he was kind of up high, and I dove down the middle there, and he kind of got to run off the top there and run on the right front tire. And anyway, next thing I know, he's rolling up through there, When we come back around, I was going to check on him, Just thought about the thing to do, but he was rolling up through there. Whoever fault it was, but and I get around there, and he got his drive shaft in his hand. He got it like this coming at me up there. Hell, he's okay.
He ain't hurt, is he?
No, he ain't hurt that bad, hell.
Hey, let me ask you guys a question. Were either one of y'all at the 91 World 100?
Yeah, both of us, I think.
Yeah, I think.
No, I don't think you was, because Garrison
not
went
there.
with me.
Well, I probably wasn't then. I can't really remember, but I bet I wasn't.
91.
I remember Kevin Weaver getting black flagged or something at that race. Now, down here you couldn't drink the racetrack, right? There wasn't no drinking back then, in the crowd or whatever. So that's the first time I went off to a race where you could see people drinking in a crowd. Well, they black flagged Weaver, did something to Weaver to get him, and apparently he had a ton of fans there. And there was almost a riot. Do you remember that?
No.
Beer bottles and cans flying, and the owner down there on the track trying to wave at them, get them to stop doing it. I just wonder if either one of y'all remember that.
I don't remember that. We was probably cleaning up broken rods and stuff about that time.
I remember Joe Boy, he'd always be pissed off being Mike Boy for drinking or doing something or other, at the shop or whatever. We'd be at the shop, Joe Boy, he got on the high roller there, and he looked up Rossboro, and I looked at him, see him coming across the track over about 200 yards. He didn't know which way he was going.
Oh, I know.
He drunk on the wood rat.
Yeah, he basically run you and Mike off for drinking and enjoying yourself, and ended up being a bigger alcoholic, the biggest one in the county.
That was pretty wild.
Tony, were y'all the wildest crew in late model racing?
Oh no. Who, us?
Yeah. Were y'all the wildest crew?
Nah, I wouldn't think so. I mean, my crew might not look just like up to specs or whatever, but Chuck, he looked like that forever. One eye pointing over here and one eye straight, Same way
One-eyed Chuck. Yeah, one-eyed Chuck.
Same way Russell Baker. I didn't know which way I looked at him either. But
Yeah. My dad met Russell the first time. We was at a restaurant in Miami, Oklahoma. Dad was sitting at a little cafe right across the table from him. He looked right across the table and he goes, "Russell, what happened to your damn eye?" Just out of the blue. It was the first time we'd ever met him. Russell said, "Well, Fonzo, when I was a kid, I got a stick in it and it poked it out." Dad goes, "Huh." He said, "You got a glass eye?" Russell said, Yeah, I got a glass eye." He goes, "Can you take it out?" Russell said, "Well, yeah, I can, but I don't." Dad said, "Yeah." He said, "I had an uncle had a glass eye. So he got drunk and dropped it in a glass of whiskey and swallowed it."
Rinsing it out.
Russell and him was like best friends from then on. He'd come to my dad to go turkey hunting every year.
Bill, you got any questions for Tony? Any other questions?
Oh, any idea how many races you won?
Not really. I'd probably guess it on the higher notes there than I would, but I couldn't really say for sure.
I know there's a bunch of them back in, and I didn't know you You raced, I think, straight stocks and sportsman cars down there
Yeah,
for
now,
years.
I won several races in that down up to there, you know, but started slowing down when I got up there racing with Bill now.
Yeah, that was you still, and I'll still mark you in my opinion. You're the most natural talent I ever seen set in a race car. I'm gonna say that to you now. I've told several people that, but you are probably the most natural talent I ever seen. When you showed up at the Show Me 100 and Roland Nix's stuff, who ain't seen a racetrack in a year, and you hadn't seen a racetrack in a year, and you set fast time at the Show Me 100, that's a feat right there.
Yeah.
Somebody told me I was in an old show car for 1 year, and I'd run something out of there. It wasn't much camp, but I said, man, you give that piece of shit a ride, didn't you? Up at the show car. I done give it all it had, I think.
Ken Essary said the same thing about it. Yeah.
But that same year, that same weekend, that we set fast time and had all the fuel pump, rag, and fuel cell.
Yep. Should have won it and Pocahontas.
Pocahontas, that's where we went.
Yep, we went the
And
next night.
15 laps, 15,000 win, 50 laps. I led every lap, I think, but the last one, Boyer behind me, and my fuel pressure dropped just like it did up there at West Plains. Just still didn't know what was wrong with it. And Bill looked over at me like, what the hell? This last lap, 15,000, paid 6 to run second. Lost 9,000 right there at the same weekend. And it come to find out it was one of them little blue plastic deals that goes on the fuel cell when you on the threads when you're putting them in or whatever to protect the threads. They had one of them in there on top of that rag. That's when it lost fuel pressure that second time. I said, y'all didn't leave no. We had to change over to gas and alcohol. And I said, y'all didn't leave no rag in the fuel cell, did you? When y'all, they cleaned the damn fuel cell out with a bunch of paper towels, what it was, not normal. You would use a towel or something. And I reached in there and pulled out a rag. Wasn't nothing you could do about it.
Pocahontas?
Well, you led 60 or 70 or 80 laps of the Show Me 100, didn't you?
Oh, well, fuel pressure dropped on me, so I had to go back.
Yeah.
And then I waited till the caution, so they about the lap before I brought out another caution. And they waited on me that time to change fuel filters. I mean, that didn't help either, so I think I wound up having to pull off the track that time.